This is the new 2023 Audi R8 GT, and it's the end of the line. Well, probably. Audi hasn't said what they're going to do with the next R8, or even if there will be a next R8, but it certainly won't be a mid-engine, naturally aspirated V10 like this car. So they're going out with a bang. The R8 GT, an ultra limited production, 600 horsepower rear-wheel drive R8 with a starting sticker price of around $250,000. This is a serious car, and today I'm going to review it and show you the quirks and features of the R8 GT. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era with free listings. You can list your cool car for free and auction it on Cars and Bids. And you should, because we've had some great sales lately, like this C8 Corvette sold for $77,000, this fantastic Mazda RX-7 sold for just under $30,000, and this wonderful Porsche 911 GT2 brought $135,000. If you're looking to buy or sell a cool enthusiast car from the modern era, the 1980s and up, Cars and Bids is the place to do it. With daily auctions, great selection, and free listings, check it out at carsandbids.com. All right, time for the quirks and features of the R8 GT. And first, a quick thank you to Audi Mission Viejo for letting me borrow this R8 GT to poke around in. This is a very rare and very special car, and it's tremendously hard to find. But Audi Mission Viejo had this one, and they let me borrow it to show it to you in a video. So thank you to Audi Mission Viejo. Now, let's talk about exactly what makes this car so special and so exciting. The big news is that Audi's saying 2023 will be the last model year for the R8. It's over. After a fantastic 15-year run and some truly amazing cars, the R8 line is coming to an end. And to celebrate the end of the R8, Audi came out with this, the ultra limited production GT. They're only making 333 of these for the entire world, and just 150 are coming to the United States. 50 in gray, like this one, 50 in black, and 50 in red. That's it. That's all we're gonna get. So what makes this car so special beyond just the limited production? Basically, to create this car, Audi took all of the best things about the R8 lineup and added them into one vehicle, and then they made it even better. Let me explain. Right now, you can get the R8 in two ways. There's a rear-wheel drive model with 560 horsepower, or you can get the all-wheel drive car with 600 horsepower. For the GT, they gave it rear-wheel drive for better handling and finesse, but they gave it the 600 horsepower from the all-wheel drive car. So the two best things combined into one, and then they started adding options. This car has basically all the desirable performance options that you can get on the standard R8s, but here it's standard on the GT. For instance, carbon fiber front anti-roll bar is a $1,100 option on the regular cars. It's standard here. Carbon ceramic brakes are optional on the regular R8s, but standard on the R8 GT. This car also has the shorter gearing from all-wheel drive models, presumably to improve its acceleration, and it has sport bucket seats, which again are optional on other R8s. They are standard on the GT. There's a long list of features that this car has standard that are optional on other R8s, but the big number is $40,000. This car has about 40 grand in options on other R8s standard, which makes its price tag a little easier to understand. This starts around $250,000, which is about $90,000 more than a rear-wheel drive regular R8. It's a big delta, but then you consider the added options, and that number becomes a little easier to figure out. But this car isn't only special because it has a bunch of optional features on the regular R8. It has a lot of cool stuff that's unique to the GT. The most obvious is the carbon fiber accessories on the outside. This car has a carbon fiber exterior treatment that gives it a much more aggressive, racy look than you can get on a regular R8. Starting up front with this carbon fiber lip spoiler, low to the ground and exciting. Then you have these carbon fiber canards, which in theory improve aerodynamics. Then moving down to the carbon fiber rocker panel, which gives it a sporty, aggressive look. Then this carbon fiber panel here behind the rear wheels, again for improved aerodynamics. And finally, the rear diffuser, also in carbon fiber and also much more aggressive than what you get on the regular R8. And then there's the wing. This giant carbon fiber rear wing is obviously different from what you get on the standard R8. It's unique to the GT, and it again helps to give this car a distinctive, aggressive, forcefully sporty personality. Another upgrade worth noting on the outside of this car, the wheels are different and unique to the R8 GT. Special 20-inch forged wheels that you can't get on other R8 models. And if you look closely, you can see Audi Sport printed on the wheel rim in red, which again gives this car a distinctive look compared to other R8s. So the GT has a special look on the outside, definitely more aggressive, cooler than a standard R8, but it doesn't have a lot of badging. In fact, this R8 GT badge back here is the only R8 GT badge on the exterior of this entire car. They're not relying on badging to let you know it's a GT. They figure the carbon fiber, the wheels, and the wing will certainly do that. Inside though, there's a lot more in the way of distinctive R8 GT badging, probably because Audi didn't change the interior that much compared to the standard R8, and they wanted to do a few changes to make it stand out. So open up the door and you can see on the door sill R8 GT, and then look a little further in and you can see the floor mat R8 GT, a reminder of what you're getting in. On the seats, embroidered into the seat back, you have R8 GT, again there to greet you when you sit down, and in the center console you have R8 GT printed next to the gear selector, and next to that you have the production number of this car. You can see 176 out of 333, that being the total global production run like I mentioned earlier. Now I want to go back to the seats for a second. Like I mentioned earlier, the R8 GT has these special sport performance bucket seats, as you can see, but it's worth pointing out they're not as crazy as a lot of sport bucket seats in a lot of modern sports cars. They're comfortable, they're not as tight or as unadjustable or as hard to sit in. They got more padding, more adjustments. They are still manually adjusted seats, interestingly, like a lot of sport buckets are, ostensibly to save weight, but they're not too uncomfortable, difficult to get in and out of. They're sport bucket seats, but sort of a light version of that, if you will. Although you will notice a hole in the backrest where you can thread through a racing seatbelt if you want to take your R8 GT on the track. But anyway, on the subject of differences between the GT and other R8 models, another one is a new feature called Torque Rear. This is essentially a drift mode, although apparently Audi didn't want to call it that for liability reasons, so they called it Torque Rear instead. You activate it by pushing this checkered flag button on the steering wheel, and then you twist the dial that surrounds this button to dial up your Torque Rear setting. What this does is allows for more wheel slip than you get with the standard stability and traction control turned on. You can dial up torque rear and you can get the rear end out a little more for drifting, although don't call it a drift mode. Now, the GT is the only R8 model that has that torque rear feature, but aside from that and a few other touches I already mentioned, there's not much different in this interior compared to the standard R8, which is generally a good thing because this is a nice interior. You look around, you see Alcantara, leather, nice contrast, red stitching, aluminum trim, lots of carbon fiber. This is a nice place to sit and spend time with a lot of nice touches and materials all throughout. Despite this relatively luxurious interior, Audi says the R8 GT is lighter than other R8 models. They say 55 pounds lighter than the standard rear-wheel drive R8 and 120 pounds lighter than the all-wheel drive model. So even though it's nice in here, you do lose a little weight. But that doesn't mean you gain any acceleration. Even though the GT has the same power as the all-wheel drive R8 and a little less weight, you don't don't have the benefit of an all-wheel drive traction launch. So this car is slower off the line. Audi says 0 to 60 in the low 3-second range, which is still an unbelievable figure, but not quite as fast as the all-wheel drive model. The benefit of rear-wheel drive is the finesse in handling, not quite the off-the-line acceleration. But anyway, on to some other interesting quirks and features to discuss in this interior. Starting over on the passenger side of the dashboard, this RWD badge, which has a long line for some reason, and then says RWD, in case you wanted a reminder that you're in a long line RWD model. Also interesting is the ceiling of this car, which has a diamond stitch pattern with this red contrast stitching, and looks a little unusual, I suppose, maybe a bit much, the diamond stitching on the ceiling, but Alcantara everywhere is kind of a hallmark of high performance models like this one. And another interesting quirk of the R8, the climate control vents on the sides of the interior are mounted on the doors. You can see right here, open up the door and the vent opens right along with it. Audi didn't have space to put them on the dashboard, or at least that wasn't this car's interior design, so they got stuck on the doors instead. Same deal on the passenger side, the vents on the door, which is unusual. You don't see it all that often, but the R8 has it. Now, beyond those quirks, some of the other ones relate to the fact that this car is really starting to show its age. The R8 is going away, in part because it's old. It's just ready for something new, some update of some kind, and you can really tell in this interior it's starting to get old. For instance, there's no center infotainment screen in this car. You have your climate controls here, but no center screen at all. The only screen to do stuff is in the driver's gauge cluster, which is fine for a driver's car, but it means the passenger doesn't really have access to anything. The navigation, the radio, phone, it's all for the driver, which is definitely old school. You also still have the cup holders inside this center console armrest. Open up the lid, there are the cup holders, the lid falls on the cups. It's not really a great situation, and you still have a physical gear selector, which most cars, and especially most exotic supercars, have gotten rid of in favor of shift paddles that do it all, maybe a couple buttons. This gear selector is still here, still taking up some space, which is kind of old school. And by the way, just in case you were wondering, yes, this car is only offered with an automatic transmission, a 7-speed dual clutch automatic, just like all second generation R8 models. You can't get 3 pedals here. But anyway, yes, the car is starting to show its age in a lot of places. However, that also benefits us because we get the V10. You get some old school stuff up here and a great old school item back there. No plug-in hybrid, no little turbo V6 just yet. Audi's still chugging along with a naturally aspirated V10. It won't last for long, and it is cool. And I'd certainly put up with no infotainment screen if it means a naturally aspirated V10. And of course, that V10 sounds pretty good. To open up the full sound, press this little exhaust button on the steering wheel. It goes into sport mode, and then take a listen to the exhaust revving as high as Audi lets me. Ah, glorious V10, or at least some of the rev range of a glorious V10. You might be wondering what is coming next, and the answer is, I honestly don't know. Audi has confirmed that the R8 is going away, which means whatever replaces this, assuming something replaces it, will probably not carry the R8 name. There's been a lot of speculation that the next generation Audi sports car will be fully electric, or certainly at least a plug-in hybrid, but whatever it is, it's not going to be an R8, and it's not going to have a V10. They're definitely going to go in a different direction with this car. Anyway, speaking of interior buttons, like that exhaust button, another one is on the door panel. This button here opens up the front trunk. You push that, it pops open, or you could push this button on the key fob, same purpose, and then you get up there. And when you're up there, you quickly discover the front trunk is actually reasonably spacious in this car. It's got some decent space. Not huge, but enough for you to put a bag or two up there. And there's extra storage behind the seats. You can see here another fairly large storage shelf back here where you can put more luggage if you're going on a little trip. This car, despite its giant rear wing and big power and price tag, is actually relatively practical, and you can go places with it if you want to with some bags. All right, driving the R8 GT. Now, This is a dealership car. There's no press cars of these because they're so limited, so I can't really push it as much as I would like to, but I've driven the rear-wheel drive R8 just recently, and then the regular R8 and the Decennium Edition. I have several R8s from this generation, so I got a pretty good idea of how this one is going to be. However, I will say, just driving this, just walking up to this car, it looks like a totally different beast from a regular R8 in a very cool way. A lot of special editions or like a little cosmetic change here or there, or just a different paint color. This is a legitimate special edition that you walk up to and you're like, wow. You see this giant wing in back and all the other carbon fiber stuff down the side, and it's clearly not a standard R8. It also just sounds insane, and then there's the incredibly limited production, which is a pretty cool component of it as well. And it feels rowdier than other R8 models. I was just recently in the rear-wheel drive regular non-GT version, and this feels more, it's got more of like pizzazz to it. Certainly more of a sound, more of a raw feel. And then you look in the back and you see that big wing in the rearview mirror and you're like, yep, this is the real deal. And truthfully, I think that this car long-term will be pretty desirable. You know, Audi made a GT version of the original R8 that has remained quite desirable, and I think that this one likely will be even more so. It has the horsepower of the good one and the rear-wheel drive of the finesse one kind of combined into one, and it's super limited, and it's kind of this special edition end-of-the-line model, and it's still got the V10. Which is a really, really, really big deal, because no matter what happens to future R8 models, and I suspect they will come back with something, maybe not call it an R8, but something, the V10's gone. This is it. This is like the end of the line for this incredible powertrain, and this car, as a result, I think will always pretty much capture people's minds and interest. And of course, like other R8 models from this generation, there's very little to complain about. This is such a great car. The technology's not so great, like I mentioned before, but other than that, from a driving perspective, this car is so impressive. It's just so much fun to drive. The ride quality is actually pretty decent, even for the GT model, which is a surprise to me. But more importantly, it's just so, it handles so well. It's so sharp, it's so quick. The steering is so instantaneous. I mean, everything about this car is just fantastic. Just like the Huracan, which is based on this car, this is really one of the great supercars in today's world, which actually I think has kind of become a little bit of a detriment to the R8. When this came out back in 2008, it was a $100,000 car, and it was just an awesome sports car. Now it is a much better vehicle, much. But it's gotten so expensive that it kind of lost some of the, not the appeal, but some of the like buyability of the original model. And you saw a lot more of the first gen R8s than the second. Frankly, this car is just so cool. The R8 in general, but this is kind of like King R8. The end of the line of the V10 cars, the special edition model, and it drives so well. It's got all the power you'd want, plus the rear wheel drive, you can really throw it around. I mean, this car is just plain cool. And in the world of the R8, this will always be hailed as truly one of the all-time greats, as it deserves to be. Now, I don't know what the future holds for the R8, but whatever it is, it ain't this. So this is your chance to buy the last of the last old school V10 awesome car. And it really has it all, including the fact that I think long-term this car, this specific, the R8 GT, will be looked at as a desirable kind of end of an era vehicle, much in the same way that stuff like the Carrera GT and the Ford GT were the end of the analog manual transmission era. This is going to be the end of the naturally aspirated big powertrain era before they started switching to plug-in hybrids and electric, which will definitely have its benefits too, but well, you get the point. And so that's the 2023 Audi R8 GT. This is an impressive car and the end of the R8 as we know it. And what a way to go out with big power, ultra limited production, the swan song of the naturally aspirated V10. This is a special car, and now it's time to give the R8 GT a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 68 out of 100, which places the R8 GT here against some similar cars, right around other R8 models. The R8 GT is very, very cool and very limited production, although its performance is similar to other R8s, so it doesn't score much higher. And the market hasn't treated the initial R8 GT incredibly well, so it's unlikely this one will shoot up in value. Still, it may someday, since it's the end of the line for a very special car and a very special powertrain. And this R8 GT will go down as the ultimate R8, at least with a gas-powered engine.